Hello adventurers, welcome back to the tavern. Today we will be talking about making characters and the red flags to avoid when doing so. It can be easy to lean on various tropes or problematic backstories when you don't have anything to go on, or a good DM to support you. I will be taking you through these red flags, but keep in mind that these are often a problem between a DM and a player. It isn't solely on the player. I will try to give strategies for both DMs as well as players to avoid these pitfalls before you're 10 sessions deep and there's no changing it. So let's get started with today's topic. 7 things to avoid when creating TTRPG characters. Number 1. Making a controversial character without giving it the time or thought that it deserves. This is a little vague, but let me give you an example. In the Daggerheart core rulebook, they give an entire section on playing characters with disabilities. And some of my players expressed interest, but much of it was at a surface level. Playing a character with a disability can be extremely empowering for someone who lives with that disability. And I would never give this advice for someone who's just looking for representation for either themselves or a loved one within their game. Unfortunately, some people want to include these types of disabilities as either just a gimmick, or in the worst case, for comedic effect. This can also apply to any other sensitive character trait, like age, racial features, and many others. Of course, I don't want to stifle anyone's creativity, but I like to warn my players of these traits before they create their characters. Have you thought about what this is going to be like to play for the next 20 sessions? Are you going to be able to represent this authentically for that amount of time? Is this a character that you've actually given a fair amount of thought to? Or is this better suited to a short campaign or a one-shot? I think including these types of characters within your cast, especially as the DM, is very important to depict the true nature of our world that we live in. But don't let that derail anyone's enjoyment. If one of your players thinks it would be hilarious to play a person who uses a wheelchair, maybe push back and see how strong their desire actually is. Ask them why they think it would be funny, and if they could accurately portray the life of a person living with such a disability, or whether or not they can give it the respect that it deserves to be able to play it at your table. And I will say this right now, if your only desire to play a person with a disability is to make fun of that disability, just don't. It's not funny, it's just bullying, and has no place at my table, and in my opinion, no place at all in the TTRPG space. Heroes with disabilities definitely exist, and they should exist at your table, but give it the thought, time, and respect it deserves to tell a real story, and it can be really rewarding. Number 2. This is one trope I see pretty often. As soon as a player doesn't have enough to go on, or all the players made their characters in a bubble, I expect to see it. That is the cliche of, my character is a wanderer from a far-off land and has no connections, or their family died long ago. The bottom line is, they aren't from this place, they have no connections, and they give you nothing to go on as their GM. This one is so often put on the player as their fault, but I see this as more of a failing between the GM and that player. I see this cliche most often when a player doesn't have a connection to someone else at the table, or they're not interested in the setting that they have been presented with, or they've made their character by themselves without any outside information. Fortunately, there's an easy way to combat this. Talk to your player. First, you can make this super easy by telling the player that they can't have no connections. Sometimes the wanderer trope can be interesting, if given the right amount of respect and time that it deserves. The problem, of course, is that most of the time I see this cliche come up, it's because it hasn't been given any thought. In my mind, the easiest way to incorporate a wanderer into a story like this is to make them have to visit the settlement every so often, or give them connections within it. Create a few contacts that they are connected to, or family that they have a reason to check in this place every so often. This will often result in the bad parts of being a wanderer being rooted out, and can even develop some very interesting relationships down the road. Number 3. Building characters in bad faith. What I mean by this is essentially min-maxing for the sake of it, and building your character mechanics first instead of story first. I understand wanting to make a powerful character, and I'm a GM who advocates for my players' power level all the time. I give out lots of magic items, and quite powerful custom ones at that. However, if you're making a character solely for the purpose of trivializing the system and the story that you've been placed in, you're acting in bad faith. This will almost always result in taking away fun from the other players as well as the GM, meaning that you're only really participating for your own enjoyment. I like to tell my players to come up with a character concept first, and then choose a class that sort of fits around that, instead of the opposite. If you make your characters centered around a single mechanic, you could end up being on the other side and feel really underpowered or disappointed with your character in certain situations. For example, in D&D there are many mechanics like prone, grappled, or charmed that work really well early on in the game against more vanilla creatures, but they're often trivialized by large monsters with resistances. So, if you make your character entirely centered around charm effects, you will feel severely underpowered against any creatures that are resistant or immune to those types of effects. I like to advocate a character with a strong theme, but remains well-rounded in what their actual capabilities are. Number 4, participation. There's no way around this one. If your player isn't willing to participate in your requests for things like backstory, session 0, safety tools, etc., this is the biggest red flag for me personally. Nothing will deter me more as a DM than me giving you my time and you not even willing to participate. There's unfortunately not a lot that you can do about this one. Obviously, if it's due to extenuating circumstances like health or family, then give grace where it's required. However, if this is a consistent pattern, then let them know how you feel. If they're willing to change and participate, then give them that opportunity. But I see only one of two options if they're unwilling. Either they aren't a good fit for your table, and you can simply let them know that you won't be including them, or if they're, say, part of your friend group and they just want to show up every game day, you can compromise and give them a character with less stakes and roles. Make it clear that they won't be getting the same experience as the other players, and let them coast. If you find this to be a disruption to immersion, or as a distraction to your other players, give some serious consideration to asking them to leave the table. I honestly feel that in some of these cases, these players can be shown the benefit to participating and creating a backstory so that they can make connections with their other players, but I also understand wanting to make your game for people who are going to participate in it. Number 5. Making an adversary within the party. What do I mean by this? The easiest example I could give would be making a deplorably evil character in a good aligned party. Part of these games is being a team. While some in-party tension can be fun, nothing derails a game more quickly than a constant dissident voice at the table. If your character only exists to make conflict at the table, then they're not really a good character and probably won't hold up over dozens of sessions. This can also take the form of PvP at the table, which I personally don't allow at all. We are a team telling a story together. If you wanted to, say, sunset a character this way, it could be interesting, but I only see red flags. The solution to this? As always, talk to your player. Not only can you root out some of these problems in something like a session 0, you could just make it a table rule to stick to one specific alignment. In this case, no evil alignments allowed at the table. That way, you don't have to say no to a specific character concept. They know beforehand. Number 6. Main character syndrome. This one is the plague of D&D Reddit horror stories, and rightfully so. These games don't have a single main character, unless you're playing a solo game. If a player comes to me with a backstory about being a god or basically being a superhero at level 1, I see red flags. These of course could be fun character concepts, if you can now justify the reason that you are at the power level that you are along with everyone else at the table. In my experience, this isn't why they want to play a character like this, though. Often, they will want to be the center of the story, and will even sideline other player characters in order to do so. What can I say about this one, though? I don't allow it at my table, and I don't think you or your DM should allow it at yours. While I think having your character deeply connected to the world is a positive thing, and these types of stories could work well in certain campaign settings, I try to encourage my players to lean into the idea that they are heroes that will become powerful over their journey. This story is what these types of TTRPGs are all about. If you want to play a superhero, there are systems for that, like Masks, where you literally play a superhero. Number 7. Metagaming. We've all experienced this to some degree. Unfortunately, we can only go so far when trying to immerse ourselves at a table playing a game. However, I think that there's a fine line between an acceptable amount of metagaming and not. For example, having or talking about a strategy before combat pops off, or even during, I think can speed up combat, which in my opinion increases immersion. But on the flip side, if you are metagaming to the point of telling other players how to control their characters, we have found ourselves in red flag territory once again. I think this can be sometimes acceptable when coming from the GM, like say if you notice that your player is forgetting about an ability that they have, but I like to use more suggesting language than outright assume that they don't know what the most optimal strategy is. I like to be an advocate for my players, not control their characters for them. Further to this point of metagaming, I like to tell my players things like, your character wouldn't know that, if they are using meta-knowledge to influence certain decisions. But I also like to encourage my players to see things from their character's perspective. Nothing can break the immersion of a table more than a character who isn't included in a scene speaking out of turn and out of character, especially if it is to tell one of the players who are actually participating in the scene what they think the optimal decision is. Our characters are flawed, just like we are as people, and we need to let them be able to make mistakes. In summary, the golden rule can be to play in good faith. If something feels wrong, it's something that should probably at least be discussed with your GM before bringing it to the table. We're here to tell a story together, not have an uncomfortable encounter with our friends. Talk to each other, and treat everyone at the table with respect. If you avoid these red flags, I'm sure that you'll be making characters that your other players will love. And if you found any of these tips helpful, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and comment down below what you liked. It really helps us out. I have been your tavern keeper, and I hope to see you back in the tavern again soon. Stay safe, adventurer.